got there Friday night, just wiped and getting ready to go to bed. And I don't know, it was like 12:30 or 1 in the morning, and about to get in bed. Phone alarms start going off, weather alerts. And like half a second after the weather alerts go off, we lose power in the house. What the hell is going on? Kind of hear some stuff outside. Lights come back on. We're like, well, something's going on. So we started. A tornado hit. Like I think we figured it was about 800 yards from my house. It hit across the main street and into the next neighborhood is where it hit. So then we were up for the next couple hours, watching the radar, making sure that there ended up being, there were tons of tornadoes, but I think there was like 7 between us and the range that night. It was insane. Hey everybody, welcome back to Red, White, and Moose. I'm freaking pumped about this episode. So for those that don't know, we got to host the first ever national 2-day match in Amarillo, Texas this year. It was the Applied Ballistics Dust Devil Duel. It was an NRL Hunter match. And I absolutely loved it. I think it ended up really well. We learned a ton of things. It was our first match to put on, so we knew there was going to be some things that we would learn and some things to change. But overall, I think it went really, really good. I wanted to kind of go over the match. It was a hard ass match. There's no way around it. It was difficult, and it was meant to be difficult. Now so the gist of this is I want to kind of break down the stages of, so for those that were there or if you weren't there, you understand. I want to kind of give the match director's point of view of what we were doing to set up these stages, what the thought process was behind it, some tips on, what we wanted to see shooters do or notice, things like that to do well on these stages. And man, it was wild. It was a fun weekend. Hosting the match was so much fun. It was me and Andrew and Will Bivens were the match directors for the match, and I have to give a huge thank you to the Bivens. It was their property that we got to put this on. They were so incredibly helpful. It was a team effort all the way around. I couldn't do it without those guys, and I have to recognize them because they did so much for the event. But man, it was so. For those that don't know, West Texas, our weather is kind of nuts. We very much get all 4 seasons throughout the year, sometimes all of them in one day. Friday we had check-in. I had friends and staying at my house for the weekend. We got there Friday night, just wiped and getting ready to go to bed. And I don't know, it was like 12:30 or 1 in the morning, and about to get in bed. Phone alarms start going off, weather alerts, and like half a second after the weather alerts go off, we lose power in the house. What the hell is going on? Kind of hear some stuff outside. Lights come back on. We're like, well, something's going on. So we started. A tornado hit. Like I think we figured it was about 800 yards from my house. It hit across the main street and into the next neighborhood is where it hit. So then we were up for the next couple hours, watching the radar, making sure that there ended up being, there were tons of tornadoes, but I think there was like 7 between us and the range that night. It was insane. So then we showed up Saturday morning. It stormed all night. So then we had about an hour and a half rain delay the first day. And I have to say this. So we had a storm delay the first morning and a fog delay the second morning. And I have to give a huge thank you to the shooters for putting up with that. Obviously it's well outside our control, but we had weather delays both mornings, but then everyone hustled. I mean, the match flowed really well. We still got out of there at good times both days, which I was very, very thankful for people, being cognizant of it, and I think it was set up well, but just shooters did well getting through. But between the tornadoes and the rain, and it was a soupy mess the first half of Saturday, just because of all the rain that came in that night. So that was crazy. And then we get going, and it just, everything about it was fun. In my opinion, it was super stressful. For those that haven't hosted a match, it's a ton of work. But so Friday, so Applied Ballistics was our title sponsor, and those guys were so awesome. They brought out a whole crew for the whole weekend. They brought out their mobile lab, and it was the first Hunter match that they had brought the mobile lab to. And so for those that haven't gotten a chance to shoot the Applied Ballistics mobile lab, think of it as, it looks like a giant lab radar chronograph essentially, but they come set this up, and we had target set up. The target was actually or like the aiming point, I think it was like 4,000 yards is what we had people aiming at, but we had them dialed dope for, I think it was 2,000 yards, and it was just dumping down into a valley, but it gave it that way we had an aiming point and for the radar and everything. And so you lay down and you shoot 10 rounds across the radar, and it can track your bullet through the air. And I don't know exactly how far it goes, but it tracks it a very long time. And then it produces a custom drag model for your load out of that rifle. And it's pretty amazing. And so you have something, for that barrel, that twist, that load, that bullet. And so and if you don't know what a drag model is, so if you, like, when you're setting up your ballistic profile in your Kestrel or your phone or app or whatever it is that you use, and you can choose, like your G7 ballistic coefficient. Well, the G7 model is a drag model, and when you do it this way, it's not based off of a G7 drag model. It's based off of a custom drag model for that setup. So it's really cool. And I did this at the Night Force ELR match a couple years ago, and shot my 300 Norma over it. They sent everything out, uploaded it, and it was money. We shot targets out to 2150 at that match, and my dope was perfect. And so it was really cool having them there, and shooters could go through, shoot. They would release the custom curve that evening, and then you could run that for the match the whole weekend. So you've got perfect dope for that gun the entire weekend. So it was really neat. So I appreciated Applied Ballistics being there. It was something different that no one had gotten to do at a Hunter match, and it's just awesome information to have. So that was cool. That was going on all day Friday. And then we had targets out to a mile to validate your dope, all that fun stuff. And then Saturday got rocking and rolling. And Raven Rifles produces artwork that shoots. Their custom lurk Cerakote pattern provides depth and color that most patterns just dream of. From Snow Wolf to Copperhead, you'll be able to blend in wherever you end up. And their limited release rifles truly are a functional work of art. They're available in limited numbers and guaranteed to catch your eyes. I absolutely love the lurk pattern. I've had it on my Really Right Stuff tripod for a while and getting most of my rifles redone in it right now. If you want to see more, go to ravenrifles.com. The West Texas Ordnance Switch Lug is a patented quick change barrel system that allows caliber and capability changes in minutes without the need of a barrel vise or an action wrench. It allows for precise, repeatable return to zero within plus or minus half MOA. It allows the use of one rifle platform with multiple barrels to perform a variety of tasks. And it can be used on short or long actions and standard or magnum cartridges. Guys, I've got switch lugs on most of my rifles, and it just makes switching barrels incredibly easy. One of my favorite things being able to do with it is being able to have a rifle and be able to switch from something, say like a 22 Creed to a 6.5 PRC in the field with just a barrel and bolt swap and no barrel vise needed. Guys, check out West Texas Ordnance and their switch lug system. So I'm gonna kind of break down stages and go over everything, because y'all were not afraid to let me know that it was hard. And I got Mike, you're an asshole. Fuck you, Mike, all weekend. But the thing that I was really appreciative of that I thought was really cool is by the end of it, I had a lot of people come up to me and, giving me feedback on the match and, different stages and just overall. But honestly, my favorite compliment that I got was, man, this match is kicking me in the teeth, but everything is fair and straightforward. And that's what I wanted. I'm not a big fan for matches that there's so much luck in shooting long range already. I don't want to say luck, but there is some. But in my opinion, as a match director, everything else needs to be eliminated the best to your ability to just be very straightforward and fair. And I do feel like we accomplished that. So we're gonna walk through the stages. And so stage one, so unfortunately, I was pretty bummed about this one. We ended up having to throw this stage out. And it was 4 pigs near to far, and we checked all of these stages multiple times, getting as the match got closer. And the fourth, and I still don't know how this happened, but the fourth target ended up being just outside of the right limiter stake for this stage, and about half of the ROs shot it that way, and it ended up messing a bunch of them up because the fourth target was outside the limit, so they didn't find it, and then they were timing out, da 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 da. We were trying to figure out the best way to make it fair for everyone. We left the stage in, let everybody shoot it because the anticipation, because we fixed it very early, and then we were trying to figure out the best way to adjust scores. Then, unfortunately, practice scores decided to take a dump on us while we were at awards trying to get all the scores put together, and it became a nightmare. And so, for time's sake, so that we weren't keeping people there too late, we ended up tossing the stage. But so the thing that I thought was funny is a lot of people struggled finding all the targets on this one, and so it was a near to far setup. But and I'm going to be gesturing a lot with my hands for those listening on audio only. But so the first one was like 180 yards, and then you went like 1030, and the next one was at like 300 yards, and you went 1030 again, and it was at like 400 yards. But then the fourth target was far on the right side, and it was at like 600 yards. And we did this on purpose because if your mind naturally thinks, okay, here's 1, 2, 3, there's a pattern, but then the fourth one was on the far right side. And so it's just something to keep in mind when it's near to far. All it means is once you find what the target before, it's going to be further than that. And just because there's a pattern doesn't mean that pattern's going to stay. So outside of that, it was a very straightforward stage. It was prone for 4 targets, not that big a deal. Then the second target or second stage, it was one of my I actually really liked this stage, and it was 2 coyotes near to far, 2 positions, both prone. And the first target was and it was pretty small. It was I think it was at like 220 yards or something like that. And then the second one was bigger, and it was essentially 2 hills back behind it. And it was at about 800 yards. Now, what we did is, so you set up over the siding stake. And for those that don't know, when you're doing these types of matches, there's generally a siding stake, and then there are 2 limiter stakes out in front of you that show you a left and right limit, and your targets are going to be in between there. And when you set up directly on the siding stake, it sets all the angles up correctly and everything, so you can find it very easily. So the limiter stakes on this stage were about, I don't know, 10 inches apart. They were very, very narrow. And so when you see that, you can pretty much know they are going to be in line with each other. And tons and tons of shooters would find the first one and then start looking left and right. Well, there's no left and right built into the limiters on purpose. And so use that now. And the other thing is people would find the first one, so we were shooting off a ridge line, and there were kind of fingers coming off of the ridge line all over the places. So the fingers coming off of it created hills and stuff. And so what I found out a lot of people were doing is they would find the first one, scan back, get to the top of the next hill, which was at about 450 yards, not find anything, and then start coming back. And then they were just looking back and forth, from like 100 to 500 yards and not finding anything. Again, little depth perception kind of messing with the next hill that the target was on did look very, very far away, but it started at like 700 yards, and the peak of it was probably about 1,000. So it was just use the limiting stakes to get all the information out of them. If they are in a line, off your left shoulder and off your right shoulder, that's you're going to be left to right. If they're really close to each other, they're going to be vertically up and down. So stage 3, this one ate people's lunch. It was the third lowest scoring stage of the match, and it was meant to. I knew this one was going to be difficult, and I wanted people to, because if you sat there and thought it through, you could get a game plan. Now, the one caveat I will say to this, so what it was is there was a windmill, and your sighting position was at the bottom corner of it, and that was your first shooting position. And then there was a mesquite corridor out in front of you, and there was going down to the ridge line. There was just all the mesquites created this perfect little hallway for you to look down. And when you look down it, the target was right in the middle of that corridor. Then your next positions were all moving towards the target. And from the first position to the fourth position, it was about 75 yards. And the second position was about 30 yards, and then it was about another 15, then another 15, and then about another 15 or 20. So, and then with that, the target was a ram. Purposefully, it was I believe it was 5/10 tall, and it was 6/10 wide. So what that means, and I ran numbers on it and everything. So on when you're getting about 75 yards closer, and I just ran off a 6.5 Creedmoor running like a 140, because that's the majority of what everyone's shooting. You had about 5 to 7 tenths of elevation difference as you got from the furthest position to the closest position. So when you moved forward, you had to take a tenth or two out as you move forward, each position or every other position, depending on how you were doing it. If you didn't, by the time you were moving up, you were going to be shooting directly over it. Now, the thing that frustrates, the match was at the end of April, and about a week or two before that, everything started greening up. The trees were growing, the grass was growing. We trimmed a ton of trees, cut down, we had chainsaws out and weed eaters and all kinds of stuff. And the way that stage was designed was you would be able to shoot from the windmill on the first position, just off a bag. You could use tripod rear, whatever, but you could get nice and solid off of it. And then the next 3 positions were all meant to be prone. Well, unfortunately, just with how fast everything was growing, some of the grass and stuff made it very, very hard to lay prone. And some guys were having to get up a little bit, like a really low kneeling tripod or something like that, which that part did frustrate me. But we even weed eated, I believe it was 4 days before shooters were showing up on a bunch of stages to eliminate this problem. Unfortunately, it was just growing really fast, and it kind of blocked a little bit of the view, so it made it more difficult than it was intended. But I still love the stage. There's going to be some tweaks and stuff moving forward, but if you see positions moving towards the target, you are getting closer. And depending if you're moving enough, you're going to have to take that into account for your elevation. And that was the whole point of the stage. But yeah, it ate a lot of people's lunches. it ended up being it ended up being more difficult than it was meant to be because of the grass and trees and stuff growing as fast as it was. But that's essentially the breakdown of it. You need to be, and so the way I do stages like that, if I see that there's a decent amount of movement, like if, most of us shooting 6.5 creeds, it's going to be a tenth or two every like 25 yards that you're going in or out. um if I see something like that and I know and I can tell it's 30, 40, 50 yards or more, I'll get a range on the target, and then I'll just swing down and I'll get a range on my furthest position, and I'll know, okay, that's 60 yards, or whatever it is. 60 yards forward, I'm going to take, I'm going to end up needing to take 3/10 out as I move forward or whatever it is. But that's how I kind of take that into account for when I'm starting to move forward. Lone Peak Arms provides precision rifle shooters with extreme accuracy through their actions. Whether you're building a hunting or competition rifle, their fusion or razor actions are the perfect foundation. Both actions are available in short or long, left or right configurations, and in stainless or titanium. Guys, I've beat the crap out of my Lone Peak actions in sandy, muddy, freezing conditions, and they're stainless and titanium, and they've just kept on ticking. Your next rifle you get going, use a Lone Peak, and they're available at westtexasordnance.com. Hawkins Precision provides precision hunting rifle components built to help you go further and shoot farther. From rock-solid optics mounting solutions born out of the Rocky Mountains of Colorado to their Hunter bottom metal and flush magazine systems, Hawkins has a solution for your next hunting rifle build. When every shot counts, hunt with Hawkins. Guys, I've been running with Hawkins on all my rifles for a long time, from their one-piece mounts to their heavy tack rings to their ultralight rings, their bottom metals, their Hunter bottom metals, and everything's been great. Next time you're getting a new rifle put together, go with Hawkins. Foundation Hunting Stocks has combined 3 unique materials, micarta, carbon fiber, and Kevlar, to create their new hybrid line of stocks. This combines the stiffness and lightness of carbon fiber with the impact resistance, toughness, and vibration dampening of the Kevlar. The micarta bedding block allows them to machine the precise inlets and seating surfaces that they're known for. Guys, I've been using Foundation stocks for years, and I love that dead recoil impulse that they have. And now being able to bring that same dead feeling into a hunting stock that's light enough to hunt the backcountry is pretty remarkable. Guys, go to Phalanx-Arms and use the code HYBRID for 10% off Foundation stocks. The next stage, stage 4, it was 2 hen turkeys from a tree. It was just a big deadfall that we pulled over there. Honestly, this was a pretty straightforward stage. It was one of the highest scoring stages. Pretty simple. It was just meant to be a positional shooting stage. The only thing, Will painted, I think there was like 6 marked positions on the tree, something like that, and you only had to pick 2 of them. So really, and it was pretty obvious which ones to choose, because it was essentially 2 off the big part of the trunk. So you could just throw a bag, move over, put the bag there. Nothing too crazy. People did pretty well on it. Stage 5, I loved this stage. It ended up being the highest scoring stage of the match. It was 4 crows near to far. It was just a simple prone 4 targets, and they were, I think it was like 115 yards, like 130, then 200, and then like 450. And the first one was essentially skylined into a tree at 100 and change, and then the second one was the same, and then the third one, it was completely skylined off of a ridge top, pretty decently sized width-wise, and only at like 200 yards. And the first 3 kind of went trace like a 1 o'clock position from the first target, and then the fourth target we put about 10:30 at 400 yards, and it was also in front of a big mesquite tree. It did blend in a little bit, not terrible, but it was meant to, because it was a very simple stage. The fourth target was meant to be more difficult. But on that note, that was one thing that I like to do. I love when match directors do, and we try to incorporate it into a lot of stages. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of having separator stages in matches, because if you do, and I'm not saying they always end up this way, but I have seen it more often than not. If you have 18 stages that are, say, a very average difficulty, and everyone's going to get 80 to 90% of the possible points on that stage. And then all of a sudden you have your one or two separator stages that are significantly harder to separate out the winners and from everybody else. Well, then if you bomb that stage for whatever reason, you're out of it or the wind changes or something, then that one stage determines the match. And I prefer not to do that. I like separator shots in a stage or separator targets. And so the thought process behind that is so say you take your average skill level shooter that's going to come through that stage. The anticipation is to hopefully get them, 4, 5, 6 points. The guys that are a step above them, maybe they're going to get 5, 6, 7, something like that. And then the guys that are truly there to compete, the guys that are there trying to win, they're the ones that are going to have to fight for that that last target or that last shot. And so that was the same thing with this crow stage, and it showed in the scores that that's pretty much what happened. But going forward, you'll notice more and more of that type of separator shot or separator target mentality that we did in a lot of things. The next one was stage 6. It was 2 mountain lions. I loved the way that this stage ended up kind of getting built, but there was 2 of these fingers coming off the ridge line that came down into a valley, and that was where your shooting position was. And you run down and you set up behind a pile of mesquite for your first position, and out. And I think it was like 450 and 5 or 500 and 550 for the 2 mountain lions, but they were essentially coming down. We made them look like they were walking down the hills down at the edge of the valley, so they were kind of coming down in. I thought it was neat. But they were both skylined off the top of the hill. So if you missed, it was definitely difficult to see if you went left or right. But they were like 2 feet behind the top of the hill, so it still very, very easy to range and get an accurate range on it. And then they were also like a mil wide, so your left and right, we made it fairly easy. But that was it, nothing too crazy on that stage. But then once you did your first 2 targets, you moved to the other position. It was behind another pile of mesquite, and so essentially it just forced you to get up off the ground, made you shoot either a high kneeling or a standing tripod shot. Then going over from there was stage 7, and this one hurt some feelings too. Overall, it was a very simple stage, but I understand why people were struggling with it. So you come up and you're up on top of the ridgeline and it's flat. And the first position was meant to be prone, and you could shoot through essentially the crotch of a mesquite tree that was coming up. It was very easy to see through. And then there were 3 boulders for your next 3 positions. And we set it up where we tried to force you to where you could shoot off of the boulders. And so the rules for the way that these matches go, you have your shooting position marked, and then you have to be able to reach that stake or whatever it is from where you set up. If you can't, you got to move closer to where you can be able to reach it. So to ensure, because in NRL you can't tell someone you have to shoot from here, you just have to mark something. And so to achieve what we wanted, we would put 2 boulders right next to each other and stick the stake right in the middle of it. And they were decent sized boulders, so the intention was if you laid down next to it trying to shoot prone, you wouldn't be able to reach that stake, so it made you get up onto the rock. But then it was a turkey at like 750 yards that was at the edge of a tree line. And I think that the turkey was like 6 or 7 tenths wide. But where I think this was messing some people up is there was you're shooting off the ridge line and it's kind of flat. but then there was a little bit of a hill, like finger coming off of this portion of it, and I think it was blocking some of the wind, that and people were thinking that there was less wind than there really was, where if once you got 20 yards past like where your shooting position was, you got the full effect of the wind. You just couldn't feel it where you were standing at. And I think that's where people were getting thrown off. I heard people were having some people had trouble ranging uh the target. I tried it with a bunch of different sets of binos. I didn't have problems with it, but it was at the beginning of a tree line. So worst case, you can try and get a few ranges on like the beginning of that tree line, see what it's giving you, or just range the placard. The placard, I think, was like a foot in front of it, something like that. So the range was it would give you no problem. But essentially, you got the thought behind it was your first position's prone, so hopefully you could get a good wind call off of it. If you missed, make an adjustment, impact, move on to the next, and then you can carry it on into the more difficult positions, being positional. But the thought was setting you up for success off of the first position. Then stage 8 was one doe, and we we bought it was a piece of shit F-150, didn't have a motor or bunch of different things, but we drug it over, and it was 4 positions. It was shooting off the hood, the front seat, back seat, and then the bed. And so the hood essentially just modified prone off of that. Then the second one, you essentially had to throw a bag on the window, shoot through the window. Third, we had both doors open with the seats laid flat, so you could go modified prone off the back seat laying down, and then go over to the bed rail, shoot, throw a bag up there. Saw it was most people just did hood, front, back, rail, but I did see a handful of people that thought it through a little bit more, and they went modified prone off the hood. Then they skipped the second position, went modified prone off the back seat. That way they could get both their prone positions knocked out. Then they would go back to the second position, throw a bag over the window sill, do tripod rear, get that support, shoot off of that one, and then move over to the bed rail and do tripod rear again. So that way they essentially could get prone, tripod rear, tripod rear. So I thought that was pretty interesting seeing people think that through. Then stage 9, let's see, where did this? I'm trying to find the scores. He left that one off. But stage 9, so it was 2 pronghorns near to far, and it was they were both meant to be prone shooting positions. The first, so we had two targets that I would consider pretty damn small. This was one of them. The first pronghorn was pretty small. It was at like 425 yards, and it was only about 2.5 tenths tall and about 5 tenths wide. But where you're ranging from was nice and open, and we put the base of the T-post in front of and at the bottom of a very small hill, where the target and the T-post were behind, or were in front of that small hill, so that because ranging a 2/10 tall target is hard for most rangefinders. So we set the base of the T-post up and the target, where if you missed trying to range the target, you were hitting a couple feet right behind it to be able to get you a good range. Then the next one was at like 780, and it was just out in the open. The first position was obviously meant to be prone, and then the second position, we spray painted the crotch of a mesquite tree, and it was only about 12 inches off the ground, and the branch kind of came out and swooped over and made an arch, and there was room if you wanted to set the bag up in that tree and shoot out of it, but it was very, very easy to just lay down under that arch right next to you were 6 inches from the marked spot, and you could just reach up there. So, and most people that saw that did that. But again, just I wanted people to think. I didn't want it to be, just overly difficult, but it's not ever going to be a meatball match. And so just little thing like that, marking a spot in the tree, but it's really intended to be prone. So then the next one, stage 10, was 4 prairie dogs. So the Bivens have a friend that was I believe he's a farmer, and that was like one of his things that he would love to do is he had these old hay bales stacked up, and he would go, essentially he made like a fort out of hay bales, and he would just shoot prairie dogs through little holes in the hay bales, and that was just his favorite. So it was kind of our little nod to him doing that. So we built a wall of hay bales and then built a port in the bottom. You just lay prone, stick your gun through the port and shoot the prairie dogs. And it was 4 prairie dogs right to left. And I I put a lot of thought into this because generally prairie dog stages tend to be one of the harder stages because it is a naturally skinny target. Um so with first off with the hay, I shoot breaks exclusively in matches, and I didn't want people to just get blasted in the face with hay if you were shooting a break. So it was set up where you didn't have to put your break in the middle of it. I don't think a lot of people thought that through, but we did set it up where you didn't have to get, you know, Zyrtec on your way home. But then the first prairie dogs, so the first 2 were 4 inches wide and the second 2 were 5 inches wide. And first one was at like 308 yards. The second one was at like 310. The third one was at like 325. And then the fourth one, I think, was at like 440. And I did play some games with people on this one. And this is why one of the stages I really wanted to walk through, for some people to get some, maybe put some thought behind it. But the first one, very easy to range. It was in front, and so all of the prairie dogs, there was one big finger coming off the ridge line running east to west, and then there were 2 smaller ones coming off of that running north and south, and they were all on those 2 running north and south. And the first 3 were on the close one, and then the second one was on the fourth one was on the farther one. We put the first prairie dog in front of the hill, so it was dummy proofed on ranging it, and you could get it no problem. And the intention was it was in front of the hill so that if you got your wind call wrong, you could see whether you hit left or right of it, make a correction. And then the farthest target was only about 120 yards further. So worst case scenario, you're probably going to only have about a tenth more of wind, maybe 2 if it's really howling. But that was the intention, so that you could see if you missed, you could see left or right, make that correction, and then you could essentially run the same wind call for the next 3 or all 4 targets, just knowing maybe add a tenth on the farther one. Then the second one was just, I don't know, 20 yards to the left of it, but it was skylined off of that first hill, and the T post was decently far back on the hill, so you couldn't. Well, in theory, you could just range the top of the hill because the targets were very, very tall, so it really didn't matter. But then the third one, also skylined, but it was pretty much placed at the top of the hill, very easy to range. And then the fourth one, also skylined. That one was placed further back, still easy to range. But that was the intention. So if I wanted people to see, okay, these are skylined. If I miss, I'm not going to see where they go. I need to see where I hit on the first one. Let's see. This was stage 10, and actually, wow, it was the second highest scoring stage of the match. I'm glad to see the thought process worked, but that's the kind of, maybe a little match director voodoo um, brainstorm going. But I wanted to explain that one for people. In stage 11, honestly, it was just straight up troop line. It was 4 coyotes, near to far, and it was 400, 600, 800, and 1,000. NRL has a rule that you can't put targets past 1,000. So this one was at 999 yards. And if you want to question that, we had GPS coordinates for all of our shooting positions, sighting stakes, and targets. We know to the 100th of a yard where that target was. It was at 999.2. But it was just meant to be essentially a troop line. You needed to be able to get a game plan on your wind, hit your first target, see where you hit on the target, make a correction, and continue on. I honestly a very, very straightforward stage. I love shooting troop lines because I think they're very technical, and it brings in a lot of different skill sets on the clock. But that's what that one was. Botnia Solutions makes unbelievably high performing muzzle brakes. Their brakes use low ground blast angles for a reduced dust signature, controlled gas exit design for a smooth impulse and stable recoil, and upward facing ports that apply downward force without introducing disruptive vibrations. I absolutely love my Botnia brakes. I've been running the Maxi and MIDI on my PRS and hunting rifles and couldn't be happier. If you want the most out of recoil control, look no further than the Botnia brakes. Use code BOTNIA on phalanx-arms.com for 10% off. Alpha Munitions delivers the brass that top shooters trust. Their proprietary OCD technology represents the first major advancement in brass manufacturing in decades. Engineered to provide unmatched consistency and strength, with OCD brass, shooters experience less plastic deformation under identical loads, resulting in extended brass life, superior pressure retention, and consistency across multiple firings. Alpha Munitions sets the gold standard for precision rifle brass, crafted for those who measure to the thousandth and weigh to the kernel. Guys, I use Alpha Munitions brass in damn near everything I do. I use it for competing, for hunting, in my business. I love it from piece to piece, lot to lot, cartridge to cartridge. It's been fantastic. Guys, go use code MOOSE for 10% off at Phalanx-Arms on Alpha Munitions brass. Stage 12 was it was just a big ass pig. I think it was 700 yards, and it was 4 positions off a trailer. Honestly, nothing too crazy. It was shooting off the first end of it, then you shot off the rail, and then the bed of the trailer, prone, and then off the spare tire. There were a handful of people that figured out you could squeeze your barrel through the corner where the tire rounded and the edge of the trailer. I mean, there's like a couple inch gap. There was a handful of people that found that and shot it prone, which I love that people figured that out. And this is one thing people like to get all up in arms about, like, gaming in NRL or these hunter type matches. In my mind, there is no gaming. It's being more efficient or thinking something through better than what was intended. And if you can do that, that's how you win in life. That's how you win in business and matches and everything else. So I honestly didn't even know that position was possible when I set it up. One of my buddies found it, and I was like, oh shit. Then I found a few more. I was like, okay, well, you found a loophole that I didn't see. So good job. Then stage 13, it was 2 mountain lines left to right. Honestly, there was a kind of a clump of mesquites out in the middle of this field. We put them on the left and right side of it. Really, but the main thing on this one, the first stage was kind of down the ridge line just a little bit. And so it forced you to either take a triple pull tripod rear shot or a high kneeling or standing tripod shot. Just you had to clear the ground, and then you could move up and shoot prone. So it was just something to force a couple different positions for people. Then stage 14. So stage 14 and 15 got a lot of people. Where we're so in Amarillo, it's big and open, lots of land, and I wanted to incorporate some good pans into this match because a lot of places that you go shoot, you don't have that ability. And so stage 14 was kind of on a little bit of a point on the ridge line, and it was 4 pronghorns left to right, and there was about a 90-degree pan from the first one to the fourth one. And the first one was over on the left, kind of out in the middle, but it had a placard next to it, and it was at about 400 yards. And then you start working right, and This next one, and it was down a little bit because it was closer. It was at about 320 yards, and it was probably about a 15-degree pan from the first one. And then you keep panning right. And then the third one was at the top of a hill at about, I think it was like 500 yards. And so, again, the separation target in this stage was the fourth one. And it was about a 45-degree pan from the third target over to the right. And it was down, it was at like 420 yards, I think. And, so the thought process behind it was, okay, these three aren't too terribly hard to find. There's about a 30 to 40-degree pan, but they kind of float a natural line of the terrain a little bit. So now I don't think that's quite exactly what ended up happening. I think people struggled a little bit more just because they would get up and see that the limiters were fairly spread out and just, start panning left and right real fast and go over them. It was a difficult stage. It was meant to be difficult. But the intention was hopefully, maybe the average guy could get, a 4 or 5 on the first, getting these first couple. Guys that were a little better could find that third one, maybe get a point or two off of it. And then the guys that were, excelling, getting to that fourth target and getting some points off of it. Then stage 15. I got cussed at more for this stage. It is what it is. People loved it and hated it. But it was the big pan. It was 180 degrees from the first target to the fourth target. Now, we put a tremendous amount of thought and work behind this. From the sighting stake, your left limit was perpendicular and your right limit was over here. So essentially, it was just one straight line. And I knew the second people walked up and saw that, they would just freak out because essentially we just said, hey, there's 4 targets and they're this way out in front of you. We didn't want people to have to scan a couple thousand or, whatever, maybe like 1,000 acres trying to find these 4. That's just insane. So what we did, and we put one feeder at the beginning of it, and then there were 4 feeders out in the field. And whenever the ROs would come give a stage brief, it was buffaloes at the feeders. And they would stand next to the feeder and tap the feeder and say, buffaloes at the feeders. The intent, so you could, and I did it all throughout the weekend, you could stand at the top of that hill and just look with your naked eyes and see all 4 feeders. That was the intent because we thought people, we were hoping, we weren't going to tell you, hey, look for the feeders, but we were trying to be as obvious as we could. Hey, buffaloes at the feeders, look for the feeders. And even if you didn't get that hint, first one with a placard, it was placard, buffalo, feeder, and all the feeders were within about 15 to 20 feet of the target. The next thought was, okay, I saw a feeder at the check-in or at the stage, and then there's one next to the first target. Maybe there's one on the rest of them. But then essentially we kind of evenly spaced them throughout. So it was about every 45 degrees was the next buffalo. And again, finding these on the clock and, getting a range and all that difficult. So we made it a prone position stage and we put all 4 buffaloes at the exact same yardage. They were all at 700 yards. So all the feeders were also in line distance wise with those. So you could range the targets, you could range the feeders, whatever. But then, so the thought process behind it was not that it happened, but it is what it is. Being able to naked eye find all the targets, then range them all being the same range, and then just lay down prone, and you just have to worry about wind calls, 4 different wind calls because you're shooting 4 different angles and work it off of that. Now, is it very difficult? Yes. Did some people hate it? Yes. Are we going to change some things for next year? Yes. Is it still going to be difficult? Yes. But that was be just that I wanted to walk people through that one. Be observant. You know, the feeders were a huge tip. But we did want to simplify it as much as possible, but still give competitors an opportunity to shoot 180 degrees because there's very few venues that you can do that. So it was hard. I already know what we're gonna do for next year. No, I'm not gonna tell you, but um it was it was more I knew it was gonna be hard, but I wanted people to have that opportunity. Then stage 16, this one was meant to pick your spirits up after that stage. It was it was like 300 and 340, and it was left to right, and you shot like a low kneeling tripod through a fence, over a bush, and then you went over, and then I did play a little bit of mind games with people on the second position. I spray painted the top of a wooden fence post, and not that, and I mean it was a sturdy fence post, so if you wanted to, you could throw your bag up on top of it, shoot off of that. You could throw a bag up and do tripod rear off of it, or you could just lay down prone at the base of the post and shoot them, which is what a good chunk of people did, but that was the intention. In stage 17, this was 4 pigs near to far, and you just laid prone and shot through the fence. But they were I think it was like 440, 470, and like 510 somewhere in there. And but the first two were kind of straight in line from one, and then the third one, or so the first, second, and fourth were all in the line, and then the third one just kind of jutted out to the left, and it was under a tree. So, and it's not like it was hard to find, but we just wanted to make it not just four in a row. But again, a fairly straightforward stage. Then stage 18, this one I think it ended up being one of the cooler stages of the match. When we set it up, I mean, there's not a whole lot to it. It was a pronghorn and a bobcat near to far, and your first position was a small mesquite tree, and you could range and shoot from there. Now, the second target was harder to find. You did have to kind of take your time scanning to the left, looking for it. But once you found it, it's stuck out fairly well. But then the second position, and this was the one that I thought was fun. So you moved over is about 15 yards, and there was a log that kind of arched up and then came back down. But it was, and the marked position was at the peak of that little arch. But it was only about, I don't know, 12 to 15 inches off the ground. So in theory, it made you think it was a very awkward position. So you just had to figure out how to shoot from a weird position. Some guys laid prone and got the big arch in their back, getting up off of it. Some guys threw a bag on it, and just crunched real low. You could do like a triple pull off the front and bag on the back. Um, but it just forced people to be very creative. And that was kind of the fun part of just seeing what people came up with. But that was the intention, is forcing you to figure out a weird position. In stage 19, it was one turkey, and it was I think it was at 780, somewhere right in there. And again, first position was prone. We wanted you to be able to get a good wind call. And then the next two were off of a boulder, and then the fourth one was off of a tree. Nothing too crazy, but that was the intention, being able to get a good wind call off of the first one. And I'll also preface this, I haven't said this yet. It's West Texas and Amarillo. Amarillo is the windiest city in the country, and it showed up that weekend. I believe by the end of the second day, I think gusts were in the mid 30s and average like 15 to 20. So I mean, it was difficult, and the weather showed up for it. So I'm oversimplifying some things. I mean, the wind was definitely up and down, but and then stage 20, this one, eh, honestly, it shocked me. It was the second lowest scoring stage of the entire match, and it was 2 positions, one off of a boulder, and then, you just moved like 10 feet to the left and laid prone, and it was 2 deer left to right, and the first one, this was another, pretty small target, and it was at like 320, and then, the second one, I believe the pan over was maybe like 5 degrees, and the second target was at about 570, I think, and it was a pretty decent sized deer target. I think it was 7 or 8 tenths wide and roughly the same tall. And we didn't paint any of the targets, but the steel was like a natural red brown, and then we stuck it right in front of a giant cactus, and so it enveloped the whole, or like, the cactus was, call it 4 feet circle, and then it was right in the middle of it. Damn near no one found it, and I don't know. I mean, I thought it was fairly easy to find. I also knew where it was, but I don't know, just people struggled finding it. I don't It is what it is. I'll have to, and I went and looked. I mean, different lighting conditions. I mean, sometimes it was a little easier to see than others, but it was still, if you saw it, it stood out, but it did shock me quite a bit um that people struggled as much as they did on that one. But this is, and I've got data. Andrew broke down, average points, average percentage clean, and average percent that zeroed it. Um, so that's all 20 stages for the match, and it was a difficult match. It was meant to be difficult. It will always be a challenging match, because I like pushing people and I like, making people better. I don't want it to be just a kick in the teeth where it's, not fun and just difficult to be difficult. Um, but I want it to challenge people and, make you think through some things. But we had a ton of fun putting it together. Everyone, was super fun. And I have to give a huge thank you to everyone that signed up. We haven't really, talked about this yet, but, at the time, we were the biggest NRL match in history, and that was a big accomplishment for us, especially with it being our first year. We had 100 and it was 192 or 193, registered shooters. Uh, Unfortunately, someone beat us. I think it was the Burris match, like a couple months later, and they had like 205 or something in there. Which, congrats! I mean, that's awesome. But I want to give a huge thank you to everyone coming out. It was awesome, and when you showed up and walked, I mean, there were a lot of people there, and we had a lot of sponsors there and some cool stuff going on. All the AB stuff. It was awesome, and getting to walk around and just chat with people, it was so much fun. Um, and, it was, Yeti. I was super stoked. We had Yeti as a big sponsor of the match. It was their first match in this type of deal, so we were super thankful for them getting involved. We had, their new, drink dispenser coolers at every stage filled with ice water for everyone, and everyone got, Yeti cups, laser engraved with the Dust Devil Duel logo on it, and stuffed with, it was Wilderness Athlete, supplements and stickers and some other stuff. Yeti came in really big for us, but it was nice. That was our goal with everything, is we wanted to go big on everything. So like for those that are watching on YouTube, so we these were our trophies that we gave out. They were custom Winkler handmade hatchets for everyone that were laser engraved, with the Dust Devil Duel logo on one, and then the Bivens were badass dudes and got, me one with the Phalanx Arms logo engraved on the other side. But, all the others had, first open, or first, open heavy, first open light, so on and so forth. But, we wanted to do something really special for everyone, and, these are I mean, you can use the shit out of these things, and you could take them hunting and whatever. Or if you, but we also wanted them nice enough that if you wanted it to be a display piece, you could do that. Things like that. We rented out a convention center for awards. We had the best prime rib of any match that I've been to. A huge thank you to Tyler's Barbecue here in Amarillo. They're top 50 barbecue monthly restaurants in Texas. I mean, they're it unbelievable. They were cutting like inch and a half thick prime rib slices for everyone, and everyone loved it. I mean, legitimately, the food was awesome. I feel like the price table was really really good. The sponsors, we had the best sponsors. It was so cool. People were so supportive, and I honestly I can't wait for next year. I think it's going to be bigger, better. I'm really looking forward to it. But just I wanted to give a breakdown of the Dust Devil Duel match. I think it was a lot of fun. I think people enjoyed it. I know we kicked people in the teeth with the Course of Fire, but I did really appreciate everybody kind of seeing what we were working for, even with it being difficult. It was understood. So, guys, if you didn't make it, come out next year. Dust Devil. I mean, legitimately, we're going to be putting in a lot more for next year. It's going to be bigger, better. I can't wait. So, let me know what you think. Shoot me a message. So on Instagram, it's the Mike Burdis on Instagram, Red, White, and Moose for the podcast, and Phalanx Arms on Instagram for the business. Shoot me a message. I would love to hear your thoughts on this breakdown. We are doing a 1-day match, September 20th. And we're going to do a handful of the stages from the Dust Devil Duel 2-day that was earlier this year. And then we're going to put in a few new stages. So if you want to come back and get some redemption, now's your opportunity. And I've told you how to freaking do all the stages. So, but yeah, I would love if you think I'm full of shit, let me know. But or if it really helped you kind of breaking down like what you want to look for in your next matches. But guys, thank you. Let me know if what you thought of the Dust Devil Duel match, if you were there, if you shot a hunter style match, or if you're planning on coming out next year. But guys, thank you. I love you guys. I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to Red, White, and Moose, and I'll see you next week.